Mitt Romney leaned back in his chair, voice smooth but laced with the kind of practiced superiority that only years of privilege could polish. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. His words carried the sting of dismissal all on there. "Own well, Congresswoman," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You've got plenty of passion, I'll grant you that. But passion isn't experience, and experience, well, that's what this country needs." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. The deliberate pause, the faint shake of the head. The insinuation that she didn't belong at the same table as him. The words lingered in the air like smoke. For a split second, the room froze. Staffers shifted uncomfortably. A few eyes darted between the two. Journalists gripped their pens tighter, sensing the tremor of a moment about to erupt, and then silence. The kind of silence where time stretches, where every heartbeat feels magnified. The narration cuts in. The room fell silent. No one expected what came next, because this wasn't just about Romney taking a swipe at Jasmine Crockett. This was about something deeper. The establishment testing the newcomer, the gatekeeper flexing against the challenger. It was the same story that had played out in politics for decades. A man with inherited credibility questioning whether a woman who had fought for every inch of her place had truly earned it, but Crockett wasn't there to play the supporting role in his drama. Her eyes never flinched. She didn't shuffle her papers or clear her throat. Instead, she leaned in ever so slightly, gaze steady, stayed, her presence commanding the space without needing to force it. Every soul in that room could feel the shift. Subtle, but undeniable. As if the ground itself was tilting, and here's the hook. Crockett's answer wasn't just a defense. It wasn't just a clever comeback to a tired insult. It was something sharper, something bolder. It was the kind of response that would flip the entire room upside down, and echo far beyond those four walls. Asterisk, what Romney delivered wasn't just a jab. It was a ritual, one as old as Washington itself. The old guard knows the script by heart: diminish, belittle, remind the outsider of their place. It wasn't simply about Jasmine Crockett. It was about defending a hierarchy, keeping the gate locked tight, because in that chamber, Romney wasn't speaking just for himself. He was standing as a symbol of something larger, the entrenched elite order that has ruled American politics for generations. A club where pedigree trumps grit, where connections count more than convictions, and where the measure of a leader is how smoothly they can rehearse the same tired traditions. And then there was Crockett, she didn't walk into. That chamber with a gilded resume or the backing of dynastic power, she carried something rarer, something heavier, the lived experience of those who rarely see themselves represented in those marble halls. She had fought her way here through the courtroom battles, through the relentless grind of grassroots politics, through every sideways glance that whispered, "You don't belong." That's what made Romney's words sting so much deeper. His dismissal wasn't just aimed at her. It was aimed at every American who had ever been told they weren't polished enough, pedigreed enough, or experienced enough to matter. His smirk didn't just question her credentials. It questioned the worth of entire communities that never had a seat at the table. And in that stillness, Crockett knew this was bigger than her, because this wasn't just an exchange of words. It was a clash of worlds. On one side, tradition wielded like a weapon, used to gatekeep and intimidate. On the other, a voice rising from the overlooked, the underestimated, the unheard. She wasn't just defending herself, the narration whispers. She was defending every American dismissed by power. That's why the air in the chamber grew heavier. That's why eyes stayed locked on her, waiting. Because people sensed what was coming, not just a rebuttal, but a reckoning. The stakes had shifted. This wasn't about decorum anymore. This was about dignity. It was about whether the same old story of power would repeat itself once again, or whether a new voice, raw and unapologetic, could break the cycle. And Romney, perhaps unknowingly, had set the perfect stage. By trying to reduce Crockett to passion without experience, he had handed her a microphone with the volume turned all the way up. Every word she spoke next would not only answer him but ripple outward, carrying the weight of everyone who'd been underestimated by someone like him. The chamber felt smaller now, as if the walls themselves were leaning closer to listen. Even those who had written her off just moments ago couldn't help but wonder, what if she didn't flinch? What if she actually turned this around? Asterisk, to understand the sting in Romney's jab, you have to understand the man behind it. He didn't just walk into the chamber as a senator, he carried with him decades of cultivated power. Polished to a shine so bright that many mistake it for virtue. Mitt Romney is not an amateur at this game. His life has been a long, uninterrupted climb through the rungs of wealth and influence. The son of a governor, the graduate of Harvard. The corporate executive who turned boardrooms into battlegrounds, his pen sharper than any sword. By the time he entered politics, Romney already wore the aura of inevitability. To him, power wasn't seized. It was inherited, refined, managed. When he speaks, he does so with the cadence of a man accustomed to being heard, not because of the weight of his ideas, but because of the gravity of his name. His very presence suggests authority, the kind that doesn't need to be earned in each room he enters. It is assumed, demanded, handed to him before a word leaves his lips. And yet, behind the sheen of statesmanship, contradictions abound. Romney preaches the language of humility, of servant leadership, of duty to country above self. But humility, when filtered through the prism of privilege, takes on a curious shape. It isn't the quiet dignity of someone grounded by struggle. It's the patrician bow of a man who knows his power is unquestioned and therefore can afford to feign modesty. When Romney leaned back in his chair, questioning Crockett's experience, it wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was muscle memory. It was the instinct of a man trained to guard the gates to ensure that only those who mirror his world are granted legitimacy. He could smile while dismissing her, because in his worldview, authority isn't shared. It is bestowed by men like him upon people he deems worthy. Romney embodies a certain American archetype, respectable on the surface, unshakable in demeanor, untouchable in practice. He represents the tradition of power passed down like an heirloom, the tradition of respect demanded, not earned. His entire political career has been built on this silent agreement that deference is his due, that contradiction is impolite, that the room bends before he does, and perhaps that's why his words cut with such sharpness. To him, this wasn't cruelty. It was order. He was simply reminding Crockett of her place in the hierarchy, as naturally as one might adjust a tie or polish a cufflink. But what he didn't account for is how much the country outside that chamber has changed. Americans are tired of bowing to polished legacies, tired of mistaking condescension for competence. The more Romney embodies untouchable authority, the more he stands as a living monument to the very elitism so many feel. Suffocated by the tension between Romney's image and reality grows sharper the closer you look. He campaigns on unity, but divides with his tone. He praises the grit of everyday Americans, but rarely allows them a true seat at the table. He speaks the language of empathy, but his eyes rarely betray the weight of shared struggle. He is a man who has mastered the appearance of leadership while often missing its soul. And in that chamber, with that single remark, those contradictions became visible. To some, he still looked like the elder statesman delivering a lesson to the young. But to others, to those who have heard this tune before, he was simply another gatekeeper, trying to silence the knock of someone new, what Romney didn't. No, what he couldn't know is that his polished power was about to collide with something he had never faced before. Not another career politician, not another elite with matching armor, but someone who had built her voice from the ground up. Forged in battles he asterisked before Jasmine Crockett ever stepped into the halls of power. She walked streets most politicians only drive past. Her story does not begin with generational privilege or gilded opportunity. It begins with grit, the kind born from watching communities pushed to the margins, from seeing injustice go unchallenged, from feeling firsthand what it means to be overlooked. She wasn't born into a family where senators were dinner guests or wealth smoothed the rough edges of life. Crockett grew up seeing the weight of the system press hardest on those with the least power to resist it. And rather than turn away, she turned toward the fight. Her path led her to law, not the polished. It's the ivory tower kind, but the kind where every client mattered, because every case was about survival. She defended those who couldn't afford the lawyers with the marble lobbies. She fought for tenants battling slumlords, for the wrongly accused, for the voices drowned out by money and influence. Every case was more than paperwork.
It was a
statement that justice should not be reserved for those who can buy it. The courtroom became her training ground. Unlike Romney, who was taught to command deference, Crockett had to earn every ounce of respect with evidence, logic, and fire. She was cross-examined by skepticism, pressured by powerful opponents, and often outnumbered, but she refused to bend. Every legal battle was another scar, another lesson, another proof that she could withstand the blows designed to silence her. Outside the courtroom, Crockett built her reputation as a relentless advocate. She didn't climb by stepping on others. She climbed by lifting them. When schools lacked resources, she spoke up.
Ow.
When police brutality tore at communities, she demanded accountability. When policies threatened to strip away rights, she stood on the front lines, megaphone in hand, voice unshaken. That's why her rise into politics was not a career move. It was an extension of a life already defined by service. She carried with her the stories of mothers who had lost children to a broken system, of families evicted without mercy, of workers underpaid and unseen. She carried their pain, but also their resilience. She was not a polished heir to power. She was a product of the struggle against it, and that struggle carved into her something Romney could never understand: authenticity. When Crockett speaks, it isn't rehearsed. It isn't calibrated for applause. It is raw, direct, and unapologetic. Some call it blunt, others call it confrontational. But for those who know what it feels like to be ignored, it is nothing less than a voice finally speaking for them. Her opponents often mistake her confidence for arrogance, her sharpness for recklessness. But Crockett's edge is not born of entitlement. It is born of necessity. When you've had to fight tooth and nail to be heard, you don't waste time with pleasantries designed to comfort the powerful. You speak the truth, even if it stings. Especially if it stings. And so, as Crockett entered the chamber, where Romney sat with the comfort of legacy wrapped around him like a cloak, she carried something far heavier than a resume. She carried the weight of communities long dismissed, of lives lived without the cushion of generational wealth, of the belief that democracy means nothing if it only listens to the privileged few, to her supporters. She is not just a politician. She is a proof of concept that someone without elite connections, someone who fought her way through the trenches of law and activism, can still stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful. That authenticity can outshine polish. That fire can outlast entitlement. She knows what it is to walk into a room where no one expects you to belong. She knows what it is to have your experience questioned, not because of your record, but because of your roots. And she knows what it feels like to take those doubts, turn them inside out, and leave the room with no one questioning again. Her journey is not about easy victories. It is about resilience forged in the fire of struggle. And with every battle, she fought in court, in community, in Congress. She sharpened the steel of her voice. Steel that did not dull in the presence of men like Romney. Steel that would not bend to condescension. So when Romney, from his pedestal of polished tradition, leaned back and asked if she had the experience to stand in that chamber, he wasn't just questioning her. He was questioning everyone she represents. Everyone who has been told they're not qualified enough, polished enough, or connected enough. And that was his mistake. Because what Romney saw as weakness was, in truth, the very thing that made Crockett unshakable. She didn't need to inherit power to wield it. She didn't need privilege to command respect. She didn't need permission to speak. Her entire life had been preparation for that moment. Every courtroom battle, every late night fighting for justice, every scar left by condescension had built her into someone who could withstand the storm, become one. Romney adjusted his tie as if tightening the knot of authority itself, his voice dripping with the confidence of someone used to going unchallenged. "With all due respect, Congresswoman," he said, pausing just long enough for the condescension to settle, "your resume is admirable, but admirable doesn't equal experienced. This isn't a courtroom. This isn't community organizing. This is the Senate. Quite frankly, I wonder if you're prepared for the seriousness of this stage. The words floated in the chamber, heavy with the weight of arrogance. A few senators exchanged glances, half discomfort. Romney leaned back, satisfied, like a professor delivering a final grade. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her chin remained steady, her eyes locked on him as though she had studied this performance 100 times before. When she spoke, her tone was even deliberate, the kind of calm that makes tension sharpen rather than dissolve. Prepared, she repeated softly. You think preparation is only found in Ivy League boardrooms? In political dynasties? Senator, some of us didn't inherit our platforms. We built them brick by brick, case by case, fight by fight. The chamber shifted uneasily. Someone coughed, the sound ricocheting in the hush. Romney leaned forward. Eager to reassert himself, Congresswoman, no one here questions your passion, he said, smiling with rehearsed charm. But passion isn't governance. Passion isn't policy. We cannot entrust this country to passion projects. We need leadership that understands the gravity of power. Power, Crockett interjected, her voice cutting through his like a clean blade. Yes, I've seen power, Senator. I've seen it deny housing to single mothers. I've seen it strip workers of wages. I've seen it lock away the innocent while the privileged walk free. Don't tell me I don't understand power. I've been in its shadow my entire life. Her words hung in the air, taut like a bowstring. A murmur swept through the rows. A journalist's pen froze mid-sentence. One aide whispered under their breath, "She's not backing down." Romney's face flickered, momentarily unsettled, but he pressed on, unwilling to cede ground. And yet here you are, dismissing experience as though it doesn't matter. You're good with rhetoric, Congresswoman, but rhetoric doesn't pass budgets. Rhetoric doesn't secure alliances. Rhetoric doesn't raise families on minimum wage either, she snapped back, calm still, but with an edge sharpened by truth. Rhetoric doesn't protect kids from violence. Rhetoric doesn't defend the Constitution when it's under siege. Real people's lives don't wait for your speeches to become policy. I don't deal in rhetoric, Senator. I deal in reality. The tension thickened. Every breath felt like it might tip the balance. Crockett's eyes didn't leave his, and with each exchange, her steadiness contrasted his tightening jaw, his forced laugh lines. The imbalance of composure was becoming visible. Spectators leaned forward as though the entire chamber had shrunk, funneling their focus on the duel at its center. Someone whispered, "She's making him look small." Another, trying to hide a grin, muttered, "She's turning it back on him." Romney cleared his throat, this time less like a performance, more like a stall. He tried to smirk, but the edges faltered. "Well, Congresswoman, if this were a trial, perhaps you'd shine. But this is politics. In politics," he said, with a practiced chuckle, "is a game for the seasoned." For the first time, Crockett leaned in. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her stillness carried more power than volume ever could. "You call it a game," she said, voice steady, eyes burning. "That's the difference between us. To you, politics is chess. To me, it's survival." Survival, she let the word linger, creates its own kind of experience. A silence fell, dense and electric. One senator shifted uncomfortably. Another's lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. The room wasn't just listening, it was waiting. Asterisk, the silence was sharp. The kind of silence that doesn't come from absence of noise, but from the anticipation of something inevitable. Crockett's last words still echoed in the chamber. "To you, politics is chess. To me, it's survival." Romney shifted in his chair. His posture, once regal and confident, now seemed rigid, defensive. The contrast was glaring. The senator, silver-haired and seasoned, looking like a general whose troops had suddenly gone missing, and across from him, Crockett, steady, fearless, with the poise of someone who had fought battles long before. This one, and never forgotten the scars. She let the silence breathe. That was her first move. No scramble, no rush. Just the calculated power of pause. The audience leaned forward, not because she demanded their attention, but because she commanded it without speaking. Then she began. "Senator Romney," she said slowly, her voice carrying the rhythm of someone who knew the weight of each syllable. "You keep asking me if I have experience. Let me tell you what experience looks like, not in theory, but in truth." Her tone deepened, and the chamber shifted with her. Experience is standing in a courtroom, defending a client who has been thrown in jail simply for being poor, and winning because the law was on our side, even when the system wasn't. Experience is holding the hand of a mother who just lost her child to violence the government ignored and promising her she won't be silenced. Experience is walking into rooms where I am told to sit down, stay quiet, and wait my turn, and instead standing up, speaking out, and making sure my people are heard. A murmur rippled through the spectators' gallery. One aide scribbled furiously, another mouthed, "Wow." Romney tried to maintain his composure, but his pen tapped rhythmically against his notepad, a nervous tell. Crockett continued, layering. "Logic upon moral authority like a builder laying stone? You call this a game? Well, I didn't come here to play. I came here because where I'm from, politics decides whether a family eats or starves. Politics decides whether a community thrives or dies. And the people I represent, they don't have lobbyists. They don't have billionaires writing checks. They have me. That's not a resume line. That's a responsibility." Gasps peppered the room, quiet but undeniable. Someone whispered, "She's taking him apart piece by piece." Romney interjected almost reflexively, "With respect, Congresswoman," but Crockett didn't let him. She raised a hand, not aggressively, but with the authority of a judge. Silencing the courtroom. "No, Senator," she said firmly. "With respect, let me finish." The audience reacted audibly this time. A few heads turned toward Romney, some smirking at the reversal. For a man long accustomed to commanding the floor, being silenced by a freshman congresswoman was a wound visible in real time. Crockett leaned forward, her voice sharper now, words punctuated with deliberate cadence. "You say, I lack the experience of power brokers, but I have the experience of the powerless. And let me tell you something, that is the experience this country desperately needs, because while you were perfecting speeches, I was fighting evictions. While you were shaking hands with CEOs, I was holding communities together after factories shut down. And while you call this a game, I've been out here dealing with the stakes." The chamber crackled with energy, the divide between her and Romney magnified. He looked polished, almost untouchably elite, but next to her fire, that polish looked sterile, lifeless. Hero and villain were no longer subtle archetypes. They were painted in vivid contrast. Romney opened his mouth again. The Crockett was already there, her timing impeccable. "You think being underestimated is new too?" "Me. Senator, underestimation has been the soundtrack of my life. They said I wasn't smart enough. They said I wasn't tough enough. A sense that falling means some son of fur ice. And every single time, I prove them wrong. You can doubt me, you can dismiss me, but you cannot stop me." The words hit like drum beats, each one echoing louder than the last. The gallery erupted into murmurs, some clapping before being hushed by security, others shaking their heads in disbelief at her sheer audacity. Romney tried to smile, but the attempt collapsed into a tight, awkward twitch. His shoulders stiffened, his pen tapping louder now. He was visibly shaken, and Crockett wasn't done. "Let me tell you what inexperience looks like, Senator. Inexperience is thinking you can govern without listening to the people who live under your laws. Inexperience is mistaking privilege for wisdom. Inexperience is believing that sitting in the same chair for decades makes you right." Her voice rose slightly, not in anger, but in conviction, the crescendo of a carefully built symphony. I don't measure experience by the length of time someone has held a title. I measure it by the lives you've touched, the wrongs you've righted, the justice you've delivered. And if that's the metric, Senator, she'll let the pause land. A thunderous heartbeat of silence, then maybe I have more experience than you'll ever know. The silence that followed was deafening. You could almost hear the air itself tightening around Romney, who shifted again, his face a study in suppressed frustration. For once, the veteran politician looked like the student in Crockett. The professor, the contrast was overwhelming. Romney sat rigid, pale under the fluorescent light, his tailored suit suddenly feeling like armor too heavy to wear. Crockett stood radiant in her fire, a living embodiment of resilience, her words electrifying the chamber like a storm rolling in. Every eye was locked on her. Every pen scribbled her words. Every whisper hummed with the same revelation. She wasn't just defending herself. She was rewriting the rules. She let the silence stretch again, this time not as a prelude, but as punctuation. Slowly, she leaned back, folded her hands, and delivered her final blow with the kind of quiet power that makes history books take notice. So if you want to know whether I have the experience, Senator Romney, she said, her voice steady, deliberate, unshakable, the answer is simple. My entire life has been preparing me for this. Every case, every fight, every battle you never saw, I'm here now, ready, tested, unintimidated. Asterisk, the exchange was over in seconds, but its echo began immediately. Phones were already in, the air before Crockett even sat back in her chair. By the time the hearing adjourned, clips were ricocheting across Twitter and TikTok like sparks in dry brush. The hashtag Crockett claps back surged into the trending column, accompanied by memes, GIFs, and bold-lettered captions replaying her words again and again. One viral tweet summed up the collective mood. Romney tried to belittle her. Crockett reminded him what real leadership looks like. Within hours, it had over 200,000 likes. TikTok creators layered her retort over music drops, stitching her calm defiance with reaction shots of roaring crowds or mic drop animations. For a generation used to snark and sound bites, her words carried something rare, a sense of history being made in real time. Cable news couldn't resist. Anchors ran the clip on repeat, panelists dissecting every pause and every flicker of Romney's expression. Some conservatives tried to spin it as disrespect. But even their segments carried the energy of defensiveness, a scrambling effort to regain footing. The footage itself was too raw, too clear. Crockett hadn't yelled, she hadn't stormed. And the contrast to Romney's smugness was undeniable. Supporters flooded the timeline with admiration. Civil rights. Leaders praised her composure. Grassroots organizers saw her as living proof that authenticity can pierce arrogance. One young Latina congresswoman tweeted, "Jasmine spoke for all of us who've been told to wait our turn." Within minutes, her post was quoted thousands of times with affirmations from teachers, nurses, small business owners every day. Americans who knew the sting of being dismissed, even celebrities joined in. A Grammy-winning rapper posted a clip of Crockett's retort with the caption, "Bars." A late-night host devoted an opening monologue to the showdown, quipping, "Romney thought he was debating a junior. Turns out he was debating reality." Laughter rippled across living rooms nationwide. But beneath the humor was something deeper. Crockett had shifted the cultural moment, yet the ripple effects weren't just online. Inside political circles, whispers grew louder. Younger politicians, especially women and people of color, felt emboldened. If she can stand tall in that room, so can we, one freshman representative told reporters. They watched not just her words, but her method, measured, grounded, unafraid. For them, it was more than a viral moment. It was a strategy for survival, in victory in spaces designed to exclude them. Romney, meanwhile, found himself in an unfamiliar position. Headlines blared his name, but not in celebration. Editorial cartoons depicted him shrinking in his chair, drowned out by Crockett's clarity. Satirists mimicked his faltering expression. Commentators noted the irony. A man who built his career demanding deference had been undone by dignity. The spectacle revealed something about power itself. Viewers recognized the symbolism. This wasn't just one senator clashing with one congresswoman. It was old guard versus new energy, entitlement versus earned respect. Millions of Americans, watching from couches and commuter trains, instinctively picked a side. But amid the frenzy, Crockett herself struck a different tone. In a brief interview outside the chamber, she smiled and said, "This was never about me and Senator Romney. This is about reminding folks that every voice has value." Her words carried the calm weight of someone who understood the stakes. The media wanted a brawl. She was offering something bigger, and that was the turn few expected. Because Crockett wasn't done. The clash had given her a platform, but instead of using it for gloating, she began to sharpen it into something more powerful. Something that stretched beyond the courtroom, beyond the hashtags, into the realm of universal truth. The headlines were still buzzing, the hashtags still trending, but Crockett's final reflection was about to take this from a viral showdown to a lasting parable. Asterisk. When the dust settled and the trending hashtags began to cool, Jasmine Crockett stepped forward with a reflection that reframed everything. She made it clear, this was never about humiliating Mitt Romney. It wasn't about scoring a viral moment or embarrassing an opponent on live television. It was about defending dignity, she said in a calm, deliberate tone. Not just my dignity, but the dignity of every person who's ever been told they don't belong, or that their voice doesn't count. Her words shifted the story. What the media had painted as a clash of personalities, Crockett elevated into a lesson about principle. In her framing, the debate was not a sparring match. It was a stage where deeper truths surfaced. She contrasted the forces at play with disarming clarity, courage greater than fear. Romney had tried to press her into silence through intimidation. Right. But courage isn't loud or forceful. It's steady, it's measured, and it refuses to bend when dignity is at stake. Integrity greater than arrogance. Titles and tenure can command attention, but without integrity, they crumble under scrutiny. Crockett's argument wasn't just sharper, it was rooted in truth, and truth always outlasts arrogance. Earned respect greater than blind obedience. The old guard often assumes deference is automatic. But Crockett reminded the country that real respect isn't demanded, it's earned through action, it's empathy, and service. This was the universal lesson that resonated beyond the hearing room. Teachers replayed the clip in classrooms to show students what it looks like to stand firm without losing composure. Parents told their kids, "This is how you handle someone who tries to belittle you." Even political cynics admitted it was. Rare to see a moment where principle so cleanly eclipsed ego. Crockett then delivered the line that captured the heart of it all. Leadership isn't about demanding respect. It's about deserving it. The chamber had fallen silent when she first uttered it, but its echo carried far beyond that room. Butte struck as both rebuke and reminder, a rebuke to those who cling to power without humility, and a reminder to anyone striving to lead that the truest authority comes not from position, but from character. Romney's silence in that moment wasn't just his personal defeat. It symbolized the collapse of an entire posture of entitlement. Crockett hadn't just defended herself, she had defended a principle that millions felt in their bones, that no one, no matter how powerful, has the right to strip dignity from another. The moral clarity of the exchange turned it into something much larger than politics. It became a parable about human worth, about standing tall when underestimated, about the power of truth spoken plainly in the face of arrogance. And as the media cycle churned, as hashtags burned hot and faded, this was the part that lingered. Not the clash, not the memes, but the lesson. Crockett had turned what could have been another forgettable political spat into a timeless reminder of what leadership truly means. Asterisk and so, we return to where it all began, a courtroom moment that could have ended as just another clash of ego, but instead, Jasmine Crockett flipped the trial, not with rage, not with theatrics, but with clarity. She showed that real strength isn't about who can shout the loudest or posture the longest. It's about who can hold their ground with dignity, cut through arrogance with truth, and remind the world that respect is never owed to a title, it's earned through character. This is why her moment matters. It wasn't simply a gotcha or a soundbite for social media. It was a turning point that exposed the hollowness of tradition for tradition's sake. Crockett reminded us that the leaders we need are not the ones who cling to authority, but the ones who challenge it when it drifts away from integrity. In an age of noise, she chose clarity. In a world of arrogance, she chose dignity. And in doing so, she left a blueprint for what courageous leadership looks like. Now, here's the part where you come in. If you believe in standing up to arrogance with dignity, if you want more, leaders who fight not with insults, but with truth, then don't just watch this moment. Be part of amplifying it. Subscribe, share, and let your voice be heard. Because every time you lift up stories like this one, you're sending a message about the kind of leadership you want to see in the world,